My name is Eleanor Grace Whitmore, though most folks here just call me Eleanor. I'm 68 years old, and for nearly 5 decades, I was the quiet, steady heartbeat behind Hazelbrook Orchards. The small organic apple farm Richard and I built from nothing but hope, sweat, and stubborn love. Even now, with arthritis stiffening my fingers, my hands still remember the rhythm of kneading sourdough at dawn. The cool spring mornings spent pruning branches beside Richard, the smell of fresh blossoms drifting through our old farmhouse windows. And 3 weeks ago, I buried the man who shared every one of those mornings with me. Richard fought pancreatic cancer for 14 long months were the strongest man I ever knew, a man of soil and sunlight and faith, slowly faded. I held his hands through every labored breath, and the night before the hospice nurse arrived, he whispered to me, voice thick with morphine. Let the kids live their lives a little longer. Don't tell them yet? And because I loved him, I agreed. But the truth? The children had already drifted away long before cancer entered the picture. Our son, Darren, was swallowed whole by the financial world in Boston, visiting home only on holidays out of obligation. And Samantha, our free-spirited girl, floated from one failed wellness venture to another, always needing one more loan, always promising it was the last time. I hoped naively that grief would bring them back to the roots that raised them, back to the orchard. Back to me, but when they showed up for the funeral, something inside me cracked. They weren't mourning, they were calculating. The night after we laid Richard to rest, I suggested we sort through his things together the next morning, a small gesture, a chance to remember him gently. But they had already been talking, already planning. The next day, sunlight spilled across our kitchen, touching everything Richard and I chose together, the chipped blue mugs, the lace curtains, the old wooden table Richard refinished in '94. I made simple black coffee, the kind Richard loved. Then they came downstairs. Darren in a blazer too sharp for a family kitchen. Samantha in silk and curls, looking more like she was headed to a launch party than a conversation about her father. Mom, Darren said, placing his fancy coffee on the table with corporate precision. We need to talk about settling things. The estate, the house, the orchard. I blinked at him. Settling things. As if I were some loose end to be tied off. You can't run the orchard alone, Samantha chimed in. There's this wonderful retirement community, Sunnyvale Estates. You'd love it, my age, a retirement home. As though I was a fragile antique to be boxed up and stored away. Then Darren slid a folder, his corporate letterhead glinting under the light. Inside was a document, a will, one supposedly signed by Richard. But the signature? Oh, it was perfect. Too perfect. Not the shaky hand of a man drowning in morphine, not the man I held as he faded. This isn't from our family lair, I said. He was lucid, Darren insisted.
He wanted Melissa and me to take over. And there's a developer, Samantha added quickly. $7 million for the land.
We'd all be set, a developer. They wanted to bulldoze a lifetime. Replace orchards with cul-de-sacs. Replace Richard's legacy with profit. You're talking about selling your father's life's work, I said quietly. Mom, be reasonable. That S when something ancient and fierce rose in me, like the day I chased off a fox from the chicken coop with nothing but a broom and fury. Show me the will, I said. They slid it closer. I didn't touch it. I'm going to bed, but deep down I knew the real betrayal hadn't even begun. I lay awake all night, listening to the creaks of the old farmhouse, the home Richard built around us like a warm embrace. And by morning, I smelled different coffee downstairs, imported, bitter, Darren's kind. When I entered the kitchen, they were already zipped up in coats. We packed a suitcase for you, Samantha said brightly. We'll take you to Sunnyvale today. I'm not going. But Darren didn't care what I wanted. The paperwork is done. We close with the developers next week. You can't stay here, I replied, calm as stone. This is my home. He stared at me like I was an inconvenience he had to negotiate with. I told them I needed my medication and family photos. They let me go upstairs, thinking, perhaps, that grief had made me soft. What they didn't know was that deep in the medicine cabinet, behind a false panel Richard installed in the '80s, was a fireproof box. Inside it, my passport, documents. and the original deed to 20 acres of orchard land. Land I had purchased under my maiden name before I ever married Richard. Land containing the only natural water source on the entire property. Without those water rights, there could be no orchard. And definitely no profitable development. I tucked the deed into my purse, walked back downstairs with steady steps, and let them believe I was defeated. We drove away. Past the orchard blooming like a promise Richard and I had kept for decades. Past the school, the library, pieces of a life I wasn't ready to surrender. But then Darren turned down a remote country road. And 20 minutes later pulled onto a gravel shoulder beside an empty field. "This is where you get off, Mom." Just like that. Like I was an unwanted passenger, a burden to drop. "There's a gas station 5 miles up," he added, as though that made him decent. And then they left, dust rising behind them. My own children, driving away without looking back. For a moment I stood there with the suitcase they packed for me, clothes I never chose, betrayal simmering under my ribs, but I wasn't broken. I was free. I turned and I walked not toward the gas station, but toward town, toward answers. Toward the next chapter they never saw coming. By the time I reached Miller's Gas and Grocery, my feet throbbed, but my resolve had never been sharper. Old Ray Miller took one look at me and asked gently, "You all right, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Just needed a phone." I called our family lawyer, Harold Jennings, and the moment he heard my voice he said, "I've been trying to reach you." Darren presented a will that didn't match the one your husband updated last year. My heart chilled. "Harold," I said, "I need your help, and your discretion." "You have both," he replied. "Come to my office." I did, and I told him everything. He listened without interruption, his eyes darkening with each detail. Then I pulled out the original deed. When Harold saw it, he whispered, "Naomi, this isn't land, this is leverage." He filed an emergency injunction, contacted the developers, froze the sale. Within 24 hours, the entire deal crumbled. The developers' lawyers panicked. Darren and Samantha panicked. And when Samantha texted me, "Mom, please call. Darren's freaking out. We didn't know about the other land. Can we fix this?" I stared at the words in silence. No apology, just fear now that the money was gone. I didn't respond. Instead, I rented a small apartment above the bakery downtown. It smelled like cinnamon and warmth and new beginnings. I taught quilting at the community center. Gardening workshops at the library. Life returned to me slowly, sweetly, and the orchard. Untouched, protected, alive. I placed the water rights in a public trust for young farmers, just as Richard would have wanted. As for Darren and Samantha, they keep their distance. Their reputations took the hit they earned. And maybe someday we'll talk, maybe, but I'm not holding my breath. Because here's what I learned standing on that gravel road with the wind tugging at my coat. Love is not blindness. Family is not entitlement. And being a mother does not mean sacrificing yourself to those who forget your worth. Before I was a wife, a mother, a widow, I was Eleanor Grace Whitmore. A woman who built something real, something rooted, something worth fighting for. I never needed to scream to be strong. Quiet strength is still strength, and the orchard still stands. So if you have ever been underestimated, cast aside, or told this is where you get off, walk, but walk with your worth. And when you're ready, tell your story. Because your voice, quiet or loud, might just save someone else.